Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. They offer free checking with industry-leading mobile banking. Who you choose to bank with can make all the difference. Visit firstbank.com to learn more. What's going on, Hokie Nation? Saturday was a tough one for Virginia Tech on the road as they fell 35-16 to Rutgers. Back-to-back losses puts the Hokies at 1-2 on the season as a team decimated by injuries continues to search for answers. We'll look big picture today, and we'll also talk about this game and what this upcoming week means for Virginia Tech football and efforts to salvage the 2023 season. It's episode 312 of the Tech Sideline podcast, and it starts right now. We record on Monday, September 18th, 2023 from the Virginia Tech High-Tech Corporate Research Center. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel, and please share the podcast with a friend. Of course, we'll introduce our football crew on set. To my right, lead analyst and columnist, Mr. Chris Coleman. Across the way, senior staff writer Andy Bitter. And in the fourth chair, of course, managing editor David Cunningham. Nick Brown, producing behind the scenes. And I'm your host, Giovanni Heater. Well, fellas, I'll ask you this first. How was the game for you guys? Long trip up to Piscataway for Andy and David. You guys spent a lot of time in the car together, I'm sure. What was that like for you?
It was a good trip. I've never been to Rutgers before. I was actually impressed with the game day atmosphere. They had a whole bunch of food trucks lined up outside. I guess they don't normally do that, but I thought the atmosphere was really good. Very New Jersey. Yes. Walking, a lot of Springsteen, a lot of Bon Jovi. They had the Sopranos theme at the end. I thought it was a good crowd and a good atmosphere, and not the game that the Hokies fans would have liked, but I actually thought that was a good matchup. You hear so much about Rutgers and they're the joke of the Big Ten. I thought it was a really nice atmosphere.
Yeah, I think Rutgers for so long. I was talking with some guys on a Rutgers podcast last week, and they were telling me about how Rutgers hasn't won a lot in recent years, but I don't think you could really tell by the crowd. And there were a lot of folks out there. I wouldn't say it was quite a sellout, but I mean it was a pretty packed stadium and lots of red. The fans seemed pretty into it the entire time. I really liked the stadium too. Pretty simple, I think. Kind of just a second layer on the east and west sides of the stadium. But overall, I had a good trip, and besides traffic and a lot of rain getting back, it was a good trip.
Yeah, I think Rutgers, they got Michigan this week. So maybe all the celebrating was in the first month of the season before they get in and play that Big Ten East division, and reality sets in for a lot of them.
Yeah, they take a trip to the Big House. I was very impressed as well. I mean, I thought the students stayed pretty much the entire game, which was pretty cool. And the place was packed. It was their Scarlet Out game. I kind of walked in, and Rutgers fans would probably be upset, but I was like, is this going to be kind of like a Duke type atmosphere where they just don't have a great crowd? And no, the place was jam-packed, a lot of energy. That train horn, everyone said they thought it was obnoxious. I kind of thought it was awesome, but maybe because Syracuse does it as well.
I don't quite understand the train. Is there like a train up there? Is that why they do the train horn? I don't know what the history of the horn is.
Back in the day, I remember watching the 97 Tech Rutgers game it was on either ESPN or ESPN2. And Tech won that game. I think it was like 60-20 or something like that. But whenever Rutgers scored, I guess this was before they enclosed the end zone. It was just a hill there. They had Revolutionary War reenactors shooting off a cannon.
They had guys in the corner. Yeah. They were dressed as dressed as Minutemen or whatever it was. Okay. I was wondering why the guy was out there with baggy pants before the game. I'm like, okay, that's what that.
But they didn't have a cannon though.
They did have a cannon.
Okay. Chris, you're talking about the 1997 game?
Yeah.
59-19 on ESPN.
Okay.
Yeah, they warned you ahead of time that if you're down on the field, that there's a cannon.
Yeah, there's like
it's not
as big as Skipper though. It's like a little tinier.
Yeah, yeah.
I made good friends with those guys while I was down there on the sidelines because I had to walk past them about 500 times and ask like, is it okay so I don't get blown by a cannon? So nice guys. It was cool. They had the costumes on.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, where'd you watch the game from, Chris?
I watched it at Champs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Did you watch the whole game from Champs, or were you
I
so
did.
disgusted that you left?
I watched the entire game at Champs, and I didn't get disgusted because like we're just kind of used to it at this point.
You sounded disgusted about the Purdue result. Is this more just sort of beaten down
It
by the result?
wasn't necessarily the result against Purdue. It was more about the clear domination in the trenches on both sides of the ball, win or lose. That's the most demoralizing thing in football. If you're a fan or you're a player or a coach or whatever, is when you just get thoroughly dominated in the trenches. And so I think that three games in, that's kind of who Virginia Tech is right now. They're playing poorly. Run defense, each of their opponents has set their season high in rushing yardage and yards per carry against Virginia Tech. All three of those teams.
Well, as always, Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. Go ahead and check out their new Checking with Perks account that comes with cell phone protection, roadside assistance, fuel savings, deals and discounts, and so much more. Visit firstbank.com to learn about this great new account for students. Well, let's get into this ball game and talk about things. First and foremost, let's go with the quarterbacks. What did you see out of Kyron Drones? Went 19 of 32, 190 yards for a touchdown and an interception through the air. Ran the ball 22 times for 74 yards. Your thoughts? Is he the answer moving forward? Were you pleased, disappointed?
I think statistically, he kind of ended up about where I would have guessed maybe going into the game, but he got there in a different way than I thought he would. I thought he did better in the traditional passing game than I would have thought. I thought Bowen, for schematically, had his best game. He rolled Drones out, changed his release point, which made it more difficult to tee off on one spot of the field. You get the defense moving side to sideline a little bit more. It opens up an inside running game to a certain extent. So I thought Bowen had his best game. And I think that helped Drones and helped him execute. When you roll a guy out, he only has to read half the field. So good job by Bowen making things easier on the quarterback this year. And I thought Drones got better as the game went on. He was a better quarterback in the fourth quarter than he was in the first quarter. Again, going on things that I would have expected the opposite, whereas I thought he did better in the traditional passing game than I thought he would. He didn't do as well in the read option game as I thought. I mean, he left, Price said it, he left yards on the field and also left a fumble on the field after a misread early on. But, you know, it's a starting point. I think Bowen seems more comfortable scheming up and calling plays for him. Now, the one caveat to that is, you know, Rutgers had no film of exactly what the Tech offense would look like with him, and Marshall will have one game's worth of film. And sometimes, you know, it's always easy to say, oh, quarterback, they should improve between game 1 and 2. The opposite can happen if the film gets out. I mean, we saw what happened with UVA's quarterback after going off against JMU. He has 4 turnovers the next game after the film gets out. But, you know, I was encouraged by it. But at the same time, my overall view of the Tech offense hasn't changed. I'm encouraged by something, but yet when I look at the final line, I see 16 points, and which is never going to be good enough.
Yeah, I think if you had told me before the game that Virginia Tech would lose by 19 going up to Rutgers, I would have said, well, the quarterback would have played a big part in that. He just probably wouldn't have played well, and that was not the case. They did not lose by 19 because of the way Drones played. I thought Drones handled himself very well in his first start. He threw the ball better than I thought he would. The way they had described it all preseason, it made it sound like there was this, you know, gulf between the way Wells threw the ball and Drones threw the ball. I didn't think that was the case. I thought he threw the ball very well. You know, his stats would have looked even better. He put that deep ball in the money to Daquan Felton. Dropped it right in his hands. He was on the run. I don't know if he scores, if he gets caught on that, but that's like another 50 yards at least on that play. I think of another couple plays out there where he put the pass right there. Could have been made down the field. So threw the ball better than I thought he did. Like Chris said, I think he got better as the game went on and he got into the comfort of the game. And, you know, maybe you're playing against a little bit softer defense once Rutgers has a lead. But, you know, he made those throws and got those yards. And I think he gave a jolt to the running game. You know, we're talking about 11 yards last week against Purdue, and they had that by, you know, 5 minutes in or whatever it was the other day. And I think Drones, let's see, he finished with 74 rushing yards, 74 of their 129 rushing yards. So the, you know, the traditional ground game is still not churning out yards in a huge way, but you see what drones can do in those QB draws. A lot of those were designed scrambles, like Chris said, rolling him out. He was really effective running like that. I think, especially if you don't have Ollie Jennings going forward, Jalen Lane didn't play in this game. The hamstring deal they tested out. I mean, those are two receiver weapons that you don't have. You're going to need a running back that can make some plays with his legs, because I don't think this offense is quite the same as what they thought at the beginning of the season.
He almost seemed a little more comfortable when he was rolling out, throwing the football, than he did when he was just sitting back there in the pocket, at least from my eyes anyways, and it is tougher to tell when you're down on the field. I'll ask you guys this. Healthy Grant Wells plays in this ball game. You know, kind of who you taking at this point? You want to see Kyron out there? You want to see Grant? Because that is the conversation all over Twitter and everywhere else.
Well, I don't think Wells is healthy, first of all. So we're having a hypothetical discussion here that doesn't really apply to this situation. They dressed him up in pregame and he was moving around there barely. I mean, he was going pretty tepid through warm-ups. They do that thing in the stretching line where they go backwards and do high knees, and Grant was just jogging next to them. He wasn't going to do anything like that. So it was pretty obvious he was not going to play in this game, and the way he was moving around, I would not expect him this week either. You know, it's a long time, a week between games, but just the way he was moving, I'm a little bit doubtful that he would play this week. But where this offense is and what this offensive line is, I think having a mobile quarterback back there really does open some things up. I mean, it does open up things in the ground game because it's an extra hat you have to worry about on defense. It opens things up in the passing game because he can move around better behind there. You know, protection's not going to be great. You're going to need somebody who can be mobile back there. And even if Grant comes back, I don't think he's going to be at 100%. And if he's not 100%, how well can he move in the pocket? So for this offense, missing the receivers that they're having right now, with the offensive line that they have, with the running game struggling like it does, I think Drones has the skill set that's more advantageous right now. Yeah, that's probably accurate. You know, contingent on he either improves or doesn't get worse. You know, well, like I said, film gets out, we'll see. But generally speaking, I agree with that. And I think Bowen just seemed more comfortable scheming with someone with Drones' skill set. Now, they did some things that they could have been doing before. They could have moved the pocket before, and they just chose not to for whatever reason. Better late than never, I guess. But they did a few different things in the passing game that I thought was better this week. So if Bowen is just more comfortable scheming with Drones' skill set, then that's who needs to be the guy. But there's a lot of things to evaluate. Like Andy said, I think it's going to be a while before we see Wells. At least another week, if not longer. So there's going to be more time to evaluate Drones, and yeah, there'll be a point at the season where they have to make a decision, and they'll have a lot more information by then, and they'll be able to make a better decision than they would if they had to make it this week. But they don't have to make it this week because it's a moot point right now.
What's going through your guys' head when second play from scrimmage, the fumble, and then 2 plays later, Rutgers is in the end zone, and you're saying, geez, here we go again. Break that down for us.
Pretty much that. You weren't expecting smooth sailing and things like that. Well, you never have smooth sailing with Virginia Tech offensively, so we already know that. So now you've got Virginia Tech offensively with a quarterback making his first career start, and you knew something was going to happen at some point. You didn't know when it would. When it was going to come. You were hoping that it wouldn't be the second play of the game, but it wasn't a surprise. It was a misread on the read option. Tootin was not looking for the handoff because the defensive end was parked on him, and so he was shocked when the ball got left right here. So nobody secured it, and that's what happens. So that's just something, he'll have to watch on film and get better at in the future, because, that had the potential to go for, at the very least a first down, because it was 2nd and 2 or something like that. So not too surprised, but like I said, you knew mistakes were going to happen at some point. Ideally, what you wanted was to win the turnover battle or break even, but Tech unfortunately was -2.
I was thinking, hey, this is improvement. Last time they played Rutgers scored a touchdown on the second play of the game. This time it was the third play of the game. So a lot better. No, I was actually thinking they've done exactly what they can't do. They got in a hole early on, and this is back-to-back games now. You're down 17-0 against Purdue. You're down 21-3 eventually at halftime against Rutgers, and this is just not a team that's built to play from behind like that. They're not good enough to come from behind by 3 scores like that. And they've done it 2 weeks in a row. And granted, they came back and they tied up against the game against Purdue, but it takes so much effort and so much of your energy to get out of that hole and to tie it up that you get to the end of the game. You're like, well, what do you have left in the tank to be able to win this thing?
Well, and to your point, Andy, some things have to, in order to make a comeback like that, have to go your way, right? You think about the hit below the waist against Purdue that gave Virginia Tech an opportunity to continue to extend that drive before the halftime break, and things like that. Things didn't necessarily shake out that way. Was there ever a point in this game, and I do want to get into the numbers here in just a little bit, but was there ever a point in this game where you said, oh, shoot, Tech's going to win this thing? Because when they went down, and granted, they missed the 2-point conversion, but they had that where they could have made it a 3-point game. That in that moment, I said, shoot, like Tech fans are kind of taking over the stadium a little bit here. I was like, we might win this thing. Did you guys ever have that, or did you never quite get there?
I'm sitting there thinking, if we can get a turnover on the next drive or something like that, or a really positive play, then continue the momentum. I thought they would have a chance, but that 3rd and 1 play, Rutgers bounced back very quickly.
Well, they when they're down 21-16, I'm thinking they've got a shot. I mean, it's 4th quarter, you're down by 5 points. Obviously, you have a shot. And they had not given up anything, really, in the 3rd quarter. They defended pretty well throughout those 15 minutes. But again, it's just you expend so much energy and you have to play perfect so much that you can't even give up a play like that. And all of a sudden that 55-yarder breaks up the sideline. It's like, okay, that felt like a backbreaker. It's like, okay, this is over at this point. Virginia Tech's not coming back from this. So, again, you just not a team that's built to play from behind like that the entire game. They've got to get a lead, feel a little bit more comfortable about themselves, allow themselves to make a mistake here or there, and still be in the game.
So you look at the passing game, Gavin Wimsatt just completes 7 passes, 16 total attempts, 46 yards through the air for a touchdown for Rutgers. It's the rushing game where they absolutely depleted the Hokies, 256 total rushing yards. Monangai, the starting tailback, had 3 touchdowns, 143 yards on the day. It felt like you were watching a abbreviated version of Israel Abanikanda for Pitt last year. And then Wimsatt, the quarterback, rushes for 87 yards and a touchdown as well. What went wrong in the why is this problem continuing?
So many things. There are injuries at safety, of course, and you can see run fit issues there because of the injuries on the back end. That's a big deal. Tech does not have a natural Mike linebacker. The guys they do have in the program that are natural Mikes are true freshmen and redshirting.
And Tisdale didn't play?
Well, he's not a natural Mike.
Right.
He was a high school. Tech's top 3 Mikes were all high school safeties. That doesn't work. That's not going to work. Of course, they tried to get a Mike from the portal. They did. He was here for like 2 weeks and was gone. So that they tried, but they just couldn't quite pull it off. And then I don't think they're playing as well up front as they did last year. You got those top 3 defensive tackles who combine for 1 tackle, and it's not. Making tackles isn't, the be-all, end-all for defensive tackles per se, but when the only thing the other team is doing is just running smash-mouth football right at you, and then those 3 guys combine for 1 tackle, you probably need a little more production than that. So tackling's bad, and some of that is the missing players on the back end, but some of it is like Tech's returning players who played at a high level last year not doing as well. Like Mansour Delane, he was an awesome tackler last year. Like he was almost Kyle Fuller level tackles. Well, he's already missed 4 times as many tackles this year as he did last year in 1/4 of the snaps. And I'm not picking on Mansour, but that's because I ran an article last week showing a bunch of guys on defense were on pace to miss more tackles than they did last year. Just a combination of things, some of which is out of Tech's control, some of which is not. The disappointing part to me, though, is some of those returning guys not being as good as they were last year, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the frustrating part, if you're a Virginia Tech fan, is the defense is prized specialty. Like you expected some growing pains on offense. You're like, okay, this is a complete rebuild on the offense. Going to take some time. Guys getting in here. They had some offensive staff turnover in the offseason. This defensive staff has been intact the whole time. This is prized specialty. He turned the play calling duties over to Chris Marvey. He felt so comfortable about where the defense was at. This is where you expected them to hit the ground running, really, as a coaching staff, and they've gotten worse this year at stopping the run. And yeah, some of it's personnel, but I think as a coach, you've got to figure some of that stuff out, especially if you're a defensive coach, and that's where you made your bones coming up in the business. You look at their issues, and yeah, the run fits have just been bad, and they're breaking big runs as a result. They have allowed the eighth most runs of 10 or more yards this year, eighth most nationally. 8 have gone for 20 or more yards. There's only 3 schools that have allowed more, and that's Western Kentucky, Buffalo, and North Texas. Not steel curtain defenses out there that we're talking about. So, yeah, I mean, you maybe can stop plays here and there, but if you give up a 55-yarder or a 34-yard touchdown on a quarterback draw up the gut where he's not even touched, I mean, that's how out of place guys were, is that he wasn't even touched going up the middle. You've got problems in the run game. You go back to that Israel Abanikanda game against Pitt last year. That Pitt ran for more yards in that game. They actually averaged about the same per carry. So that's how bad the run game was in this one. In the game where a guy ran for 300 yards against them, they had the same yards against per carry against Rutgers.
Wow. I think probably the disappointing thing about this game is the manner in which they racked up those yards, because in the first game, okay, ODU, new offensive scheme, maybe you see some things you're not prepared for, and they get some yardage as a result. Second game, okay, the Tech offense couldn't pick up first downs in the second half, so the defense is on the field a lot, so they got worn down at the end of the game. Okay, well, they'll be better next week because neither one of those things are going to apply probably in this game, and they didn't apply. Tech had the ball for over 33 minutes and ran 71 plays to Rutgers 50, so there wasn't...
TOP, big TOP advantage.
Yeah, exactly, so fatigue wasn't an issue, and they knew exactly what was coming. They knew exactly what was coming. I mean, the Rutgers only threw it 12 times.
Yeah, it wasn't like, oh, they tricked him with this play. Yeah. They were pretty straightforward with what they were running and running it over and over. Yeah. And Tech still couldn't stop them in certain situations.
Like the Tech defense right now has become what Tech fans used to make fun of. Just not good enough, not physical enough, not smart enough, not tackling well enough. It's like the physical play has dropped off so much on defense. Tackling's bad. Guys aren't getting off blocks. So you have to wonder, like, why is that? And that's where Tech's, veteran players are up front. So yes, there are problems on the back end, but there's a lot of problems up front too. So it doesn't surprise me too much that Mose Phillips, true freshman safety, isn't very effective, or that converted wide receiver Jalen Jones isn't playing well at safety. What surprises me is Tech isn't getting particularly good play from guys up front who have been, solid players for them in the past.
You think about some of those rushing defenses in the past, and they didn't just have guys that would eat up space on the defensive line. Like Tim Settle played in the backfield. Ricky Walker played in the backfield. Derek Hopkins, going way back, played in the backfield. They didn't just eat up blocks. So, I think it's all 3 levels. They need to be better defensively, and I mean that's a major challenge. It's not getting easier once you get into ACC play and in the way some of these teams run the ball.
Fortunately, Marshall has a mobile quarterback and a 1,400-yard rusher. Good times.
Good timing.
Wow. That works out beautifully. David, you got something for us in the fourth chair?
I think this stat's very interesting. Virginia Tech had 15 third down plays to Rutgers. Rutgers had 13. Virginia Tech averaged 2.7 yards on third down, 41 yards on 15 plays. Rutgers averaged 10.5 yards on third down, 136 yards on 13 plays. Now, again, Rutgers only threw the ball 16 times and only twice on third down, 1 of 2 for 7 yards. Rutgers ran the ball 11 times for 129 yards and 2 touchdowns on third down. And a lot of these, if you break down the third down statistics, Rutgers was 4 of 4 on 3rd and 3 or shorter, and 2 of 5 on anywhere between 3rd and 4 and 3rd and 7. Rutgers got itself in good situations. Rutgers didn't run more plays, didn't have more time of possession, but it put itself in good situations, and it kind of just waited for Tech to crack. And that's really the only thing. And you talk about, Andy and Chris are talking about defensive struggles overall. Kelly Lawson, leading tackler with 11. there were only 3 tackles for loss. Tech didn't get a push at all. Lawson had 1, Jaden Keller had half of 1, Derek Canteen had half of 1, and Josh Fuga had 1, and that's it. Tech didn't have a presence in the backfield at all, kind of like what Andy said. There weren't guys, quote unquote, eating up blocks, and it got to the point where I think when you are a Virginia Tech defense and you have your secondary is as young as it is, where you're playing a true freshman safety and you're playing a converted wide receiver junior at safety. I mean, we saw it on that 55-yard touchdown run on 3rd and 1, which I would say was the deciding play in the game. Rutgers motioned the guy over, cleared the weak side of the field. Jalen Jones was too far pinched in. Mose Phillips was on the complete other side of the field, and there was no help. Like that was a perfect example of Rutgers manipulating very casually and easy, manipulating a very young and inexperienced Virginia Tech defense. And I think you point to the injuries. Sure, Alan Tisdale didn't play. We don't know why. Jalen Stroman went out. We don't know why. Nasir Peoples has not played the last 2 weeks. But there are like big picture depth problems. And I think that is the biggest thing. Like you look at, even the starters, the guys who have been in this program for a while, the Josh Fugas, the Mario Kendricks, those guys have been around for a while, but they didn't make any plays really either. So it like they both said, it's kind of at all levels at this point, and the depth is showing. Tech was thin before injuries, and now Tech's even thinner.
To jump onto your point about that 3rd down play, I believe Rutgers called a timeout before that play.
Yeah,
they did. So they set up that play. That was an intentional play. They knew Jalen Jones was going to be lined up on that side of the field, and so they sent the man in motion to make it, just make Jalen Jones make a play in space. He's isolated there, right? So that was a concerted effort by Rutgers on a 3rd and short play to isolate Virginia Tech's weakest defender. It's really good.
And he got caught up at the line.
Right. It was a really good coaching job by Rutgers, and you were hoping for improvement there over 3 games, but we haven't seen it. At this point, they need to move either Delane or Canteen to safety, especially now that maybe Stroman is out. I don't think you can go into next week's games with the possibility of both Mose Phillips and Jalen Jones starting at safety. Like at least one of those spots is going to need to be filled by either Canteen or Delane, and hopefully Stroman is able to play. When it comes down to it, I would rather trust like a true freshman corner than a true freshman safety. Corner's a lot easier to play as a true freshman than safety is. There's a reason throughout Virginia Tech football history seen so many true freshman corners make impacts, but true freshman safeties making an impact has been extremely rare. So that's one thing Virginia Tech can do that could help their run defense some this week is they need to move one of those 2 corners back to and start them in safety.
I think big picture, what is the disappointing part for Virginia Tech is what do you always hear about defensive coordinators say? We want to make them one-dimensional. We want to, get them into one thing, then we know what they're doing. We're going to stop it. I mean, Rutgers was one-dimensional. They weren't forced to be one-dimensional. They just were. They didn't really pass the ball at all. Virginia Tech knew they were going to run it. Rutgers knew they were going to run it. They were just going to go straight at them, and Tech was still helpless to stop it by the end of the game. So I keep coming back to it. That's the side of the ball that you would have expected to be fixed first here and to be closer to being the finished product. And it feels just as far away as the offense right now.
Yeah, it really does. And I agree that it's probably more disappointing. Like I thought the running game offensively would be better, but based on what we saw last year, I'm not surprised that it's not. But I am really surprised at the drop off on defense. You don't necessarily think you're going to be dominant or anything like that, but I mean, Tech is one of the worst teams in the country stopping the run. And I mean, Wimsatt, he was 1 of 2 for 7 yards on 3rd down and passed for 46 yards and 2.9 yards per attempt. And you lost by 19. Like that's it's hard to, if you told me those stats before the game, I would have been like, all right, now we're talking pretty good chance for a road win there, but it's just not how it worked out.
Yeah. I think you look at, it wasn't, Rutgers had 3 plays of 20 or more yards. So it wasn't like there were these huge plays every single drive. But 2 of those were touchdowns. One of them was a 34-yarder from Wimsatt, and the other was from Anungai, the 55-yarder. Rutgers had 2 rushes of 20 yards. Those were the 2. 6 rushes of 10 yards. But they just kept putting Virginia Tech in these compromisable positions. And I think the fact that Virginia Tech might have some of the best cornerback, like Tech has a really solid cornerback trio, maybe one of the best in the conference. But I don't know, Virginia Tech might go the entire season and those guys might not be truly tested because the run defense is so bad that teams don't have to throw the ball. And this Rutgers rushing offense, I don't want to say, I mean, it's probably average, I would say. Nothing crazy special. But like Jordan Travis and Florida State are coming up. There are some good teams on the schedule that are going to run the ball even more. And if Virginia Tech doesn't force a quarterback to throw it more than 16 times for 46 yards, that's a problem. Goes to what Andy and Chris are saying. This is a big problem. And the fact that Rutgers was one-dimensional and Tech still couldn't stop it. And, you know, I will give the defense some kudos. The defense forced 7 punts in the game. And, Gio, you asked Andy and Chris earlier about, you know, when the score got to 21-16. I thought there was some hope because the defense had gotten 3 straight stops, had been on the field for less than 59 seconds after forcing a 3-and-out. That unit was rolling, but it only took one play to kind of break the dam, so to speak.
Well, good time to break things up a little bit here and remind everybody that the Tech Sideline podcast is also brought to you by Coldwell Banker Townside Realtors, trusted real estate services for the Roanoke and New River Valleys of Virginia. If you're in the market to purchase or sell a residential property, or if you're looking for land or investment property in Southwest Virginia, we have you covered. With 3 offices in the area, we serve Blacksburg, Christiansburg, Radford, Roanoke, Salem, Vinton, Smith Mountain Lake, and all of the surrounding areas. Visit cbtownside.com to learn more. All right, Andy kind of brought us to that big picture conversation. I want to take it there a little bit further here and ask you guys this. I've been asked this question a handful of times, and I've literally said, ask Andy and Chris. They know the answer better than I do. How much of this is injuries, or how much of this is Virginia Tech's really just not that good this year? Or is it all of the above, obviously?
Yes. Like I said, key injuries are holding the team back at certain positions, wide receiver and safety specifically. But, you know, that doesn't excuse 11 yards rushing against Purdue, and that doesn't excuse a bunch of defenders who are returning starters missing a lot more tackles than they were last year. It doesn't excuse, you know, defensive linemen that have a lot of experience and a ton of snaps under their belt not playing as well as they did last year. So it hurts, but it doesn't hurt any more than like some of the regression we've seen from some key players, in my opinion. And
injuries happen. I mean, that's part of football. You're going to get that every season. It's on the coaches to figure out a way to mitigate that. You know, how are you going to limit the weaknesses you have by having 2 brand new safeties back there? What do you have to call differently to make that work? Who do you have to shift around to make that less of a problem? So, you know, this is why they pay the coaches so much. Fry's making $4 million a year to figure this out, and right now they're not coming up with solutions to that. So I think that's the part that, you know, Hokies fans have to be, you know, hit their head against the table.
I think they'll probably maybe kick themselves a little bit. Like, I'm assuming that either Delane or Canteen will move to safety this week. Don't know that for a fact, but that's my assumption. Probably won't show up on the depth chart per se, but that's
no, absolutely not.
But that's what'll happen during the actual game. I expect they probably wish they had made that move earlier, because I don't think Jones has made the game-to-game progress like they were hoping that he would, but I think it's reached the point now where, yes, you do have to make that personnel move to help your defense.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's a combination of everything, Gio. It's a team that was already razor thin. I think you look back to last year, and it is, I don't want to say amazing, but maybe amazing how few injuries Virginia Tech had last year. This is me saying this, Tech's heading into week 4, and Virginia Tech has, knock on wood, jinx, gone 2 years so far, or a year and 4 weeks, without having an offensive lineman injured outside of Jesse Hansen, who had to medically retire. Virginia Tech has not had any injuries up front, but that group is just not that talented, I don't think. But last year, Tech didn't have many injuries across the board. Now injuries are starting to pile up, and the depth is showing again. I think all of us before the season, we all felt pretty good about Tech at a lot of areas because the starters were pretty solid. I would say we were all pretty confident about the defensive tackles, and they don't have any injuries, but as Chris talked about, they didn't really get much going on the ground against Rutgers. I'm hopeful. We requested to talk to J.C. Price this week, one, because he has a connection to Marshall, but I'm also curious to see what he has to say about that push up front. But then you look at the spots that have had injuries, and Virginia Tech starting Caleb Woodson at star linebacker because Keonta Jenkins only played 3 snaps because he's injured. You're starting a true freshman there at linebacker. Alan Tisdale, for whatever reason, did not play. We don't know why. Jaden Keller, PFF says he graded out okay, but as Chris said, not a guy who's a natural Mike linebacker. Overall, across the board, Tech's starting lineup was okay. Probably could compete with maybe the average teams in the ACC before the season, but then you just cut it down. As I wrote about over the weekend, if you go back to the beginning of the season, there were 8 guys who were listed at starters at one point that are not playing, or they picked up an injury on Saturday at Rutgers. Jalen Stroman was that one. Alan Tisdale didn't play. You go Grant Wells, Ollie Jennings, Jalen Lane, Nick Gallo. I mean, it's across the board. 8 starters makes it really, really tough, but it's also a combination of there's no depth behind them. And Brent Pride talks about this. We need to build depth every single week. But at some point, I feel like you have to just throw young guys in situations and hope for the best and take the lumps that come with them, because there's only so much wiggle room now. And I guess that's kind of what you're seeing with Jalen Jones and Mose Phillips, right? Haven't played necessarily well in the run game, and they're in positions where you hope they didn't have to be. Andy and I talked about this on our drive back yesterday. Virginia Tech, I'm sure, hoped that Jalen Jones and Mose Phillips weren't going to have to play a lot at all this season. And now they're potentially going to be Tech's 2 starters unless there's a change made. That is just one example of how thin Tech is.
Well, Andy, we had kind of talked about it, and I want to ask you this question. Rutgers was a very, very big game. Now you got Marshall coming up, and is it too early to start throwing out the words must win going into week 4?
I did. I hate that phrase because it's not like the program just folds if you lose. It's not like it's like, all right, we just pack up shop and that's it for Virginia Tech football. So there's still an entire ACC season after that. So I really loathe that phrase because it sounds very dramatic sometimes. But in terms of, can this team get to a bowl game? And I know Hokies fans get all over. They can't even win a game. They're not going to go to a bowl game. It's like, all right, we're talking big picture here, what they can still accomplish this season. What I thought was a reasonable goal coming into this season and marked improvement from last year to get to a bowl game, get to 6 wins. If you lose this week and you're 1-3 going into ACC play, that seems like a really long shot. I don't see 5 wins on the ACC schedule. Now, I might not see 4 either, but much better chance of getting to 4 and scrapping out 4 than having to get 5. So, this was considered a manageable non-conference schedule. I think you looked at it and you go, man, Tech could win all 4 of those games. Tech could lose all 4 of those games. That's just where this program is right now. If you come out of that 1-3, when a lot of people were thinking 3-1, 2-2 at worst, you're sort of behind the 8 ball. And then you start the ACC play with Pitt. I know Pitt has not been great. They've got offensive issues, but I think that's just a team that physically will just come in and go, all right, this is a fist fight. And I don't know if that's a game that Virginia Tech is well equipped to play. And then you have Florida State after that. You lose this week, 1-5 is a very real possibility. You win this week, Pitt, who knows how that can go. I think you're just in a much better situation, obviously, by winning the game. But, man, it just like starting games in a 17-0 hole or 21-3, starting the season 1-3, it's going to be really hard to get to that goal, even if you make progress over the rest of the year.
That's pretty much my take as well. If any game is a must-win, Well, it kind of depends on what your goals are, and I think that's what we kind of established the goal was going into the season. Just 6-6 and making bowl. I thought that was reasonable. I think we all thought that was reasonable. No more than less than that, but you also don't want the same record as you had last year. Basically, you should do better than that, I feel like.
Schedule eased up too this year.
Well, it'd be tough to go 3-8 again. They would need a cancellation
Correct.
along the way.
Right.
I don't know if that's going to happen.
So I have a general question for everybody. Like, what would you set the 3 games into the season? What would you set the over/under win total for Virginia Tech this season total right now, based on everything you know right now?
2.5.
I would go higher than that.
I'd go 4.
I'll go 4.
I would go 3.5.
I mean, you said that was too low, so I would go 3.5. By default.
I would go 3.5.
3.5. Okay, and
3.5, 4, somewhere in that range, I think.
right now, if I had to like make a prediction, I'd say they probably win 3 games this year. After watching them.
And where do the other 2 wins come? And in which order are they most likely?
I mean, Virginia and Boston College are teams that are on their level.
Right.
I mean, if you're looking at like where you are in the ACC pecking
But they
order,
never go win up there.
God, I can.
I've seen them win at BC before.
Yeah, it has happened. It has happened before, but not
BC
recently.
just almost beat Florida State, so maybe they're getting a little
that
better.
quarterback for BC ran all over Florida State.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you know, they could beat Marshall. I know they're 9-point underdogs. Amazing. I don't know what the line has moved to since it opened at Marshall. I think they could win there. Again, I don't feel like they've played their best football, obviously.
No question.
So there's going to be games, and you line up the games. You go, oh, they're not going to beat this team, not going to beat this team. And it's like on that day, maybe you could win a game. Sure. Maybe you can pull it out, and the result is not how everybody thinks it's going to go. But, man, it is looking uphill to even get to like 4 or 5 wins.
Yeah, I mean, at some point that will happen. Like, Tech, by all accounts, should not have been in the game with NC State last year,
right.
but they were.
True.
Things like that. So that's going to happen at
Liberty,
some point.
they were what, 10.5-point dogs at
Yeah,
Liberty,
on the
and
road
they
against-
won the
You're
game.
saying at some point a team will play down to Virginia Tech's level.
Yeah.
Or they'll play up to the.
They'll knock out Florida State until.
Again, I don't think I go looking at Florida State as one, but they're you know, from week to week, there's going to be variance in how your team plays. And I don't think Virginia Tech has necessarily played well in any of these games. I mean, I think they could have played better against ODU despite what the score was. They obviously could play better against Purdue and obviously could play better against Rutgers. So haven't seen the best version of Virginia Tech. I don't know what the best version is when they do put that all together, but haven't seen it yet. So, you know, we'll see.
Let's kind of look at this and like where are spots that are going to help when you get certain guys back. Obviously, you'd like to think you're going to have Jalen Lane this weekend. You should, right? And considering he almost went this past week against Rutgers, you're probably not going to have Ali for quite some time.
I would not anticipate him.
We don't know anything about Alan Tisdale.
He was injured. We know
right.
that.
All coach said
undisclosed
is he's
injury.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a mystery absence.
Right.
But it must have happened late in the week because we talked to him on Wednesday. You know, coaches typically don't have guys talk to the media. They're going to be held out of the game.
Right.
If you had to pick like 3 guys that you're like, man, they could come back and within the next, I'd say 5 weeks and make a serious impact, who are they?
I mean, obviously Jalen Lane. We don't know what Stroman's injury is, so I have no idea.
I was going to say Lane and the 2 safeties.
Stroman and Peoples. I mean, Peoples was at the game. He had his
Right.
leg in a sleeve.
I've heard
Tisdale was
sleeve.
at the game.
I've-
He was
yeah.
not dressed, or
I've
he
heard-
was in a jersey.
I've heard Peoples is PCL. I don't know a timetable on a PCL injury. I would anticipate he'll be back at some point. I just don't know how long that lasts. But yeah, those 3 guys.
I would think Stroman would be back before him.
You would think.
But just having one of those safeties back would help a lot,
Yeah, it
especially if then you can move
If you can move
Mansour
Delane,
or
exactly.
Canteen over there and help out a little bit with some of that work.
More severe. Google tells me more severe injuries for PCL tears take 3 to 4 months. If surgery is required, it's way more. If it's not as bad, it depends on essentially physical therapy
It's
and
if
how
it's a partial tear. I
yeah.
guess.
So it all depends. Yeah, I think the safeties are the 2 you have to go with, and then Lane because. You know, Jennings isn't coming back anytime soon, even though Tech hasn't announced that. Lane, I think, could make a big difference. And I thought, all things considered, DeQuan Felton was pretty good against Rutgers.
Gotta make
He
that catch.
he dropped that one. Yeah.
He came back and
did.
caught a touchdown right after that, though.
Yeah.
It was a good bounce back, is what I'm
was.
saying. Sometimes a guy
Yeah.
would drop a long pass like that and it'd just be like, shut it down for the game. Like, I can't believe I made that mistake. He played well in the fourth quarter and continued to
He
make
took
plays.
a hit too. That catch he caught out of bounds.
Kind of surprising.
He said
that
he
didn't get
got
a
the wind
flag.
knocked out of
They
him.
throw flags on anything that seemed like borderline targeting now, or take a look at it. I thought that was an interesting one that they
I
did.
believe that Tristan Race, that's the play he's going to take a look at for his officiating column
There we
for
go.
us this week.
Yeah, but I thought Jalen Lane, he's a difference maker, and in the way that he's quick and speedy, and you can get him the ball in the flat, and he can make guys miss and get upfield, and that's something Virginia Tech doesn't really have. And we saw a couple of these young guys, and this is what Pride talks about, building depth. We saw Aiden Green, Xavier Turner Bradshaw get their first catches in their career. But if you get a guy like Jalen Lane back, this is a guy who's dynamic all over the place. And then you look at the safety. We already talked about that. There are glaring depth issues there. You need Peoples and Stroman back if you can get them healthy. I also am very curious about Tisdale. He's played, he improved. I wrote a story on him last week. He kind of made a similar jump that Dax Hollifield made last season. He got a lot better. He's not an A-plus talent, I don't think, at Mike linebacker, but he's gotten a lot better under Chris Marv's tutelage. We don't know why he's not injured, or what his injury is and why he didn't play. But I think he's a guy that could potentially help too, though he hasn't been fantastic against the run. He's not like a Dax Hollifield plug against the run.
And also, once they get Christian Darrisaw back, that'll be. Oh wait, no, that's the Vikings. Never mind. The Vikings could desperately need him back. Imagine adding him to this offensive line, though. That's the problem with the offensive line. They don't have somebody out that they're waiting for to come back. The cavalry is not coming in that part of the game.
You were also mentioning, David, the freshman wide receivers. Takai Heath comes in the game, and then he gets banged up.
He played like
kinda.
2 or 3 plays, right? And then he comes off with a hand or wrist injury. It looked like. Just when it rains, it pours with injuries sometimes, and it's pouring on the Hokies right now.
One thing we did not talk about is Tech missed that field goal, and then later on they got it to a point where they could have, at that point, if that field goal goes in, that 2-point conversion would have tied the game. Granted, they didn't get the 2, but you're kind of looking at a different game here if you end up making that. And it was what, a 34-yarder, David? Can you fact
36.
36-yarder?
Yeah.
It just feels like you need your points there.
And
Well, they haven't scored offensively in the first quarter this year. I mean, the special teams is outscoring them because ODU sailed a snap out of the end zone in the opener. It's just can't start games like that. It's just deflating. If you're playing from behind all the time, you put a decent drive together like that and miss a field goal at the end of it, or a turnover that they had right away in the game. It's just they have come out of the gate very bad so far. And then Price said it afterwards. That's on us to figure out what's wrong there. We got to fix that because you can't start games like that over and over.
What'd you think of Kyron's pick? It was kind of on the far sideline, or the near sideline for you because you were up in the press box. Miscommunication? Did he miss the throw? It seemed like really more than anything a really nice play by the defensive back.
It was a strange play because there were 2 receivers in the same area.
Yeah.
And Benji Gusnell actually hit DeQuan Felton's knee with his helmet and kind of snapped his head back. I'm like, man, is he going to be able to continue? He apparently was fine. That guy takes a lot of hits and just beat up and all these, like the operation man. He's got like a big wrap on his shoulder and he's had his knees repaired before. I don't know what it looked like. It was maybe a busted play or improvised play because I don't know how you throw where 2 guys are converging in the exact same spot because it brought both defenders to the same spot too, and that's how they ended up picking off the pass.
Yeah, I thought it was. I didn't go back and watch a replay, but whenever you see 2 receivers pretty much at the exact same spot, that's generally a sign that something went wrong in the play. So the play was busted from the start because of that probably, and then he complicated matters because there were 2 defenders there. And you can't throw the ball in an area where there are 2 defenders. And it was also a great play on the ball by the Rutgers defense.
That didn't hurt them though. The Rutgers didn't score off that drive.
You're exactly right.
The funniest thing from the press box is I couldn't even tell that it was picked at first. I just saw the 2 Tech wide receivers run into each other, and for a second I thought the same thing that happened in Jennings happened to Felton, where Benji Gosnell kind of rolled up on him for a second, and it looked like what in the world just happened? And then Rutgers runs away with the ball, and it's like, they picked that off. I think it was just bad communication. But again, if those 2, and I think this goes back to the bigger point about drones. If those are his 2 mistakes, a botched snap on the second play of the game and a throw into double coverage when guys are running, probably there's a bit miscommunication there. If those are his only 2 mistakes for the game, like the biggest 2, that's a positive. Those are fixable mistakes going forward. And I think this all goes to show you that Drones played a pretty clean game otherwise, and he opened things up. Chris, I think you wrote yesterday, Bayshall Tootin had like 4.1 yards per carry.
Yeah.
As a result, that is a positive. Tech was able to run the ball a little bit better because of Drones' play. I think, again, he has to be the guy going forward, and I think if Tech can clean up those types of mistakes, he will be even better.
Right.
Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say my issue is, though, like, I agree if he cleans up those mistakes, but, like, really over the last 2 years, how many mistakes have we seen Virginia Tech clean up?
Hey, I'm putting in perspective. You're the one saying that. I agree with you.
Ladies. All right. The other thing, too, here, I was thinking in my head, hey, let me go back and look. Like, did Kyron throw a pick on a 3rd down trying to make a play, extend the drive a little? Nah, we got the kickoff, and then that was the 1st and 10 from the 25 that he throws the pick. So that was a drive starter to throw an interception. Just a tough way for that to shake out. Nevertheless, guys, whether it's big picture about this ball game before we wrap things up today, your final thoughts on Rutgers, and of course, we'll preview Marshall later on this week.
Rutgers is just one of those games that we're probably not going to remember at all 10 years from now, other than the fact that it happened. Maybe I'll remember the crazy passing stats for Rutgers and the fact that they still won the game by 3 scores. But I think the main thing, like, I'm thinking more like bigger picture now than anybody else. I know everybody is going to want to talk about each and every week the quarterback situation and things like that, but Virginia Tech has lost 9 consecutive games against Power 5 teams. At that point, and some of those have been close, don't get me wrong, but 5 of those 9 have been by 17 points or more, or 16 points or more, and by an average of 2 touchdowns. That's not competitive football. So if you get to the end of the season and that trend continues, what does Pride do? Does he believe that making changes on his staff or anything like that is the way to go? I'm actually already thinking more about that than I am next week. That's just the way I am as a thinker. Once I see something that I don't think is going to work, I immediately mentally move ahead to something else. So I know everybody wants to talk about quarterback and things like that, but like I agree about the spark that Drones brought, but at the same time, in the end, 2 turnovers and 16 points. If that's an improvement, that means Virginia Tech has been horrible. So I want to, by the end of the season, I want to feel better about the big picture by the end of the season, regardless of record. That's the main thing I'm looking for right now.
Yeah, Virginia Tech's one of the worst teams in the Power 5 right now.
No question.
I mean, it's just in black and white. That's what it is. It's going back to that Pinstripe Bowl in 2021. They're 1-10, 1-10 against Power 5 competition. Went back and looked it up. Northwestern, I think, is 1-11 in that time. UVA is 1-9. That's the company you're in right now. Virginia, historically not a great ACC program, the cellar dweller there, and then Northwestern, and look at all the issues Northwestern is going through, and Virginia Tech is in that same neighborhood. It just doesn't feel like the progress that you'd like to see in year 2 is happening. And year 1, maybe you say mulligan. Look at the talent level on this roster. They brought in a lot of talent in this offseason. They've had a year to put their stamp on how this thing is working, and you're still not seeing the progress with it right now. And I think Hokies fans out there have to be frustrated by that, because didn't take Duke 2 years to turn it around. Mike Elko's 12-4 in 2 years. And, I know rosters are all different and in different situations, but I saw that Duke defense in 2021. I saw what mediocre Virginia Tech offense did to it, and what turned out to be Justin Fuente's last game, where the administration was so impressed by what they did to Duke in that game that they fired Justin Fuente 3 days later. Colorado was an absolute mess last year, one of the worst teams in football.
That's a little different.
It is a little different, but they hired a magnetic coach who, within the confines of the rules, has completely reshaped that roster, and now that program is there's national buzz about it. Everybody's talking about it. There's just two examples of programs that were in as bad a shape or worse shape than Virginia Tech, following 2021, who have completely turned things around. And here are the Hokies. What are they last 2 years? 4-10?
4-10.
4-10. And you keep hearing them talk about patience and slow build, putting this thing together. I can understand why fans are frustrated looking at the product they have right now and being told it's going to take longer to get this thing fixed.
And the wins are over Liberty, Wofford,
BC,
and ODU.
Old Dominion.
Right.
Yeah.
And like BC, if Virginia Tech and UVA aren't the worst Power 5 programs, then it's Boston College. Right.
And if it'd be one thing.
Northwestern.
Okay.
Well, it'd be one thing if you were seeing steady progress.
Right.
They were losing closer games. They're still losing these, losing by 19.
Yeah.
At Rutgers.
Yeah.
I mean, Rutgers isn't. They're better this year, but I think they will be exposed coming up once they play the meat of the Big Ten schedule here. So I think it's that lack of progress and just constantly being told, no, it's another year away. Be patient with that. I mean, that's just got to make you lose your mind.
Yeah, and it's frustrating for the fan base. I know it's such a good fan base. I mean, it's going to be 3 straight sellouts with the Pitt game. I've heard
which would you like me to give you the kick time?
Sure.
It just came out.
Andy, you're going to hate this.
No, it's not noon, is it?
8 p.m. on the ACC network.
Is it really?
No way.
Wow.
They gave a
For
primetime
Pitt.
game?
Yeah.
They like
gonna be
their
a late
Sandman. I bet Tech gets really good ratings for ACC
I'm
network
sure,
games.
yeah.
So I've actually heard the Wake game is fairly close to selling out too. So it could be 4 consecutive sellouts. Like, what a loyal fan base, because they're not getting a great. I know people from North Carolina who flew from North Carolina to Rutgers for that game the other day. So
Wow.
Tech fans are a very, very patient group. But at some point, the script has got to flip, and they got to start winning some football games.
8 p.m. No kidding.
Yeah.
That's wild. What's coming up on TechSideline.com this week?
Tristan Raish should have an article about officiating as usual. Brandon Patterson will have video breakdown of the game and preview of Marshall. We'll do our regular Marshall preview. Normal media stuff Tuesday, Wednesday, I assume. Q&A.
Yeah, we'll see who they give us. We're not sure yet who's coming. Assuming Drones is going to be the quarterback again, maybe I'll write something
anybody
on
interviewed him
Drones
yet?
this week. Yeah, we've talked to him in the past before. We talked to him post game.
Okay.
On Saturday, they did not bring a quarterback. We requested quarterbacks last week. They did not bring one. We'll see what they do this week.
Okay.
David, anything for you?
Yeah, well, I want one quick thing, and then I've got 2 questions. They kind of touched on all that. I just wanted to touch on the depth chart stuff and the injuries, because I saw a lot of people complaining about how, the depth chart's not accurate. Virginia Tech is, as evident with Grant Wells last week, where after the game, Brent Pry said, he barely practiced at all last week. Virginia Tech is, I guess, not necessarily always telling the entire truth when it comes to the depth chart. So take everything on the depth chart with a grain of salt, because as we said before, Chris said what Nasir Peoples' injury might be, and Nasir Peoples is still listed on the depth chart, even though he hasn't played the last 2 weeks and probably won't play this week. I assume he'll be listed on the depth chart tomorrow. So Tech isn't necessarily, this is Nick Gallo was listed, same team Nick Gallo was listed as a starter for week 1 when we knew he was going to be out for the season. Again, take everything with a grain of salt. I have 2 questions, and kind of goes to the big picture thing. Do you guys, this is from ONB Hokie, do you guys get a sense of urgency from Pry and the staff? Not saying he should be losing his cool and panicking in front of cameras or the team, but being around him and the staff, do you feel like there's a sense of recognition that the fan support, which of course, as we said, will be multiple sellouts, won't stay this strong forever, and that Tech is at a very fragile state as a program? If Tech could continue slipping deeper into this pit of irrelevance, and at some point, there might not be a hole to climb out of.
I think Pry is so good in front of a camera and putting on a smiling face, even when things are going poorly, that even if there was a sense of desperation or something like that he wouldn't show it. You wouldn't be able to really sense it, per se. I think as far as that goes, actions speak louder than words, so you won't be able to get a feel for anything like that until the end of the season, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, these losses eat at these guys.
No doubt.
Like whatever they're like afterwards, and trying to be positive and be passionate about stuff. Josh Fuga was especially passionate in the post game with his quote that he read at the end. I mean, they put so much work into this stuff in the offseason. They have so much invested into this program that losses like this, like people might be like, oh man, they just don't even care or something like that. They care. They care a lot, and I think you don't always see that in the press conferences, and you don't always see that in the interviews like that, but it's there, and these losses hurt, and they want to turn this thing around as bad as anybody else does.
Last question before we go. If you guys had to name an MVP from the first 3 weeks of the season.
I think our Virginia Tech's most consistent player on either side of the ball so far has been Stroman. But the thing is, he hadn't been out there all the time. He got hurt this past week, and then he got the targeting in game one, right? So I think when he's been on the field, he has been Virginia Tech's most consistent player, in my opinion.
Peter Moore. I'll go with Peter Moore.
Even though he had
a bad punt the other day.
13-yard punt?
He had a bad punt, but he had that bad punt. He still averaged almost 43 yards a kick. The ACC Player of the Week in week 2. Maybe that's a telling stat that your punter has been the most
I'd be tempted to
impressive so
go
far.
With Kyle Lowe. Lots of touchbacks.
Yeah,
lots of touchbacks.
Or maybe another way to say it is Ali Jennings, and he's been injured since the second game. He was that good in the first game.
I mean, you look at the tackle numbers, you can't not like Kelly Lawson. I don't know. Jalen Lane, I thought, brought something special to the offense.
I would say in the first 2 games, Lane was on fire.
An edge that nobody else brought. And I don't know if Rutgers, I'm not saying we win. I just don't know if you had 100% Jalen Lane, and maybe not this 80 to 90% that Brent probably talked about in his press conference, but if you had 100% healthy Jalen Lane, maybe some things go differently, and you make some bigger plays in the pass game or whatever, or frees up Quan for a couple more hours, whatever it may be. I think he's kind of an X factor, no doubt.
Oh, I think you could make an argument for the first game and a half. He could be considered the MVP. But, kind of like Stroman, he hasn't been there the whole time. I picked Stroman because he has played in all 3.
So is Peter Moore.
It's true.
So is Kyle Lowe. Peter Moore's finished all 3 games, too.
That's true.
True. Never been hurt. And he's the captain.
There you go.
Oh, yeah. You can't go wrong with that.
There you go.
A little bit less physical demand at the punter position than safety, though. So
Right. All right. Well, I think that wraps things up for episode 312 of the Tech Sideline podcast. For Nick Brown behind the scenes, David Cunningham, Andy Bitter, Chris Coleman, I'm Giovanni Heater saying so long. We'll see you on Thursday, and we'll preview Marshall. It's episode 312 of the Tech Sideline podcast. We'll see you later on in the week.